Thumbs record.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep, we're good.
Um,
All right.
okay, everyone. You want to kick us off, Emmy?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our part two of our parent-teacher conference talk. Tonight's talk will be focused on post conferences. So it's called Beyond the Conference, Turning Feedback into Action. And we're going to talk through how you can interpret feedback, what to do, how to make a plan of action. So we're really excited for you to join us. We'll tell you a bit more as we get started.
Perfect. So happy to see many of you again. My name is Dr. Chloe Massey, and I'm a child development specialist and a parenting educator. And my background is in early childhood education and child development research. I now have a private practice focused on supporting parents and all the things from early childhood all the way through about middle school right now, and then I tap out. I'm also a professor and an advisor. And my goal, and I hope this comes across today, is just to make the research feel practical and to break down some really helpful strategies that you can use at home. And I'm based in Fairfield, and I am mother to three boys, a 7-year-old, 4-year-old, and a 7-month-old.
And I'm Emmy Hollenberg. I am a learning specialist and executive functioning coach and the founder of Your Learning Toolbox, which is an educational services company. We provide academic tutoring, executive functioning coaching for students in grades K to 8, similar to Chloe. We kind of tap out after middle school. I'm a former special education teacher. I've taught the threes through high school. Primarily, my focus is on elementary education, and my private practice, we focus a lot on parent to school liaison. So we bridge the gap between school and home, making sure that collaboration and connection at school, at home is really connected. We are virtual and in person, New York City and Fairfield County. And I'm also a mom. I have an 18-month-old son.
Okay, so quickly, our agenda today, we're going to do a quick review of part one. If you weren't here for part one, we actually have it recorded and up on our YouTube channel. So we'll be sending that along. Might be good to reference in the spring when the next round of conferences come. We'll talk a little bit about our guiding framework, the post-conference emotional reactions, parenting strategies, and then really now what. We also had some questions that were submitted, so we will get into those. And we think those will be really helpful for any parent because they're just such relatable questions.
And as Chloe mentioned, I'm going to do a quick review of part one. But if you missed part one, it is available on YouTube, and we can share that link for anyone who missed it. And part one, the primary guiding framework was on three pillars, which collect connection, collaboration, and clarity. And through those three pillars, we feel that that is where the true connection and comes from. At parent teacher conferences, we also discussed how when you feel prepared coming into a conference, really centering yourself, thinking through what you want to hear as a parent, what questions that you have, what you're noticing, all of that great background work will just lead to a more confident conference and making you feel prepared entering that conversation with your child's teacher. Oftentimes, it's the first sit down between you and the teacher and the team. So it's a really nice way to enter, just feeling calm, ready, connected, and prepared. We also discussed how it's really important to use specific language because that really leads to insight. And that leads into my next bullet point. Language is super important because if you ask focused questions, you're going to get focused answers. So asking a broad question with more broad general language, like how's my child doing? What is going to just lead to a broader answer, and it doesn't really get at a collaborative conversation and doesn't really get at topics that maybe you're wondering about. So asking a more focused question like, tell me what it looks like when my child is doing independent reading in the classroom is going to be so much more helpful for you as a parent. We also discussed, and this is going to be really the crux of what we're talking about tonight, how partnership continues beyond the conference. So really extending beyond the conference. It's really the jump off point from the start of the year. Your conversation with the teacher at fall conferences is going to set the tone for the rest of the school year. And as a reminder, we discussed this in our last talk, but the fall conferences really set the stage for collaboration and goal setting. It's your, as I mentioned, it's your first time sitting down with the teacher, really setting goals, thinking through what you want to see for the school year. And then spring conferences is when you get to reflect, celebrate all the growth that your child has made, wrap up the year in just a nice way. So that was really our part one.
Yeah, and I think the video, it's on both our YouTubes. I forget how long it is, but it's definitely worth a watch if
Yeah.
you are going into conference season again.
And we will also, I just forgot this
Yeah.
piece. We have a takeaway sheet from part one that has all this information as
Oh,
well that
yeah.
we'll share.
Good call out. So I think a good place to start in this part two, now that Emmy's kind of wrapped up what we did in part one, is just the emotional reaction that comes after a conference. I think it is not uncommon for parents to leave conferences with a mix of emotions. And I've seen this as a teacher. I've also felt it as a parent. And there are so many reasons why this can happen, but sometimes the teacher ends up confirming what we already know about our child, which in some ways can feel very grounding and reassuring. Like I see that too. Feels nice to be on the same page. Sometimes we might feel relief when we leave a conference, like we hear some strengths and we hear how our child's grown and we're able to reflect and notice their progress, which is sometimes hard to do when you're just in the daily grind with your kids. So that's a reassurance that can feel good. And honestly, other times we learn something new that can bring up questions or concerns. And this is, I think, also a really relatable feeling. So, all three of these feelings can exist at once. There's no right and wrong here. It is usually, as Emmy said, the first touch point for parents and teachers. So it's not surprising that you might get some information that you haven't heard yet. Although in the first session, in the first workshop we did, we talked about how if there's really big news being delivered at a conference, you should have some questions. You should not walk in and be totally blindsided. Okay, so processing the feedback. Feedback can be positive or negative, but we'll stick with feedback as we often think, which is something for our kids to work on, and it can feel negative. When we hear something hard about our child, I think as parents, our instinct is often to defend or go into panic mode, but I think this is a good and important reminder for all parents that feedback is really data. That is what feedback is. It is information. It is not the teacher judging your child. I will admit I know that it can feel that way, but it is not that. It is truly a snapshot of what the teacher is seeing at school. And again, remember, there are a lot of kids in the classroom, so the teacher is doing their best to capture as much as they can about each child. Feedback you get in a conference is not a prediction of your child's future. I think it can land very heavy and very hard for parents, but it's a moment in time and it's not a predictor of their long-term success and their outcomes. So along those lines, I think that it's really important for us to shift separating their behavior from their identity. So you might say, or even reframing in your head, like, my kid struggles with reading, but this doesn't define them. Or my child struggles with impulse control right now, but that doesn't mean he's a bad kid or he's out of control. And I think these little shifts can be really meaningful. And this was such a theme in our first workshop, but before responding to the teacher, or maybe you're sending a follow-up email, it is really important to regulate yourself so you can respond thoughtfully and not respond with anger or resentment. Because the whole idea is we keep coming back to in our conversations, the idea of a collaborative team. And I think in both my work and Emmy's work, we're part of that team of supporting families in different ways. And it's so much easier when everyone's open to the conversation. Okay, so you've gone to your conference, and now how do you talk to your child about the conference? We want kids to feel included. So First of all, you should talk to your child. I actually just did this today. I had my conference for my middle son. He's 4. I went to his preschool, and tonight at dinner, I told him about it. So we want our kids to feel included and not like they're being evaluated. It's a good practice to share positives first and highlight their growth and their effort. And you might say something like, we talked about how hard you're working on reading, and your teacher's seeing, not for a 4-year-old, but maybe for a second grader, and your teacher's seeing that you're improving. I am a big fan, I know Emmy is too, of focusing on the process and not the product. So instead of focusing on the reading level, you're going to focus on the fact that they're reading more challenging words or reading longer books. It's a good idea to keep your tone really curious. So you might even ask some open-ended questions to your child. What are you feeling like you're doing really well at school? What feels really hard right now? Um, those are great conversations to have. And if something does need improvement, which there should always be something that needs improvement when you leave the conference, frame it as something that the team is going to help work on together instead of like a consequence. So you can say, your teacher and I are here to support you in learning how to sit through morning meeting, or your teacher and I are going to help you learn to focus for longer periods of time because that's hard. So the goal is that kids feel supported and not like they're in trouble for whatever it is they're working on. And all of this comes down to the idea that we want our kids to have a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. We want them to understand we are always growing, we are always learning. And this is best supported by parents who don't label their kids. So try your best. If you feel that your child is blank, try and keep that to yourself or you and your partner and not put that label on them after a conference.
So important.
Yeah. Okay, on to you, Emmy.
Okay, so like Chloe said, you had your conference, came home, we talked to your kids. You might still have some questions or some thoughts, and maybe this is happening during the conference, how to clarify expectations with the teacher. So just to backtrack, right? The teachers are in it every day. They have the background knowledge, they have the whole picture, they see the whole class. And so they might just be sharing information with you, and you're kind of coming in very fixed on what your child is doing. And it might feel a little unclear, and you're kind of like, I'm not sure what you mean by that, or this doesn't really make sense. If you have that feeling, ask it. And if you don't do it during the conference, that's okay to follow up post conference, but just be really mindful of, oh, when you said my child is does XYZ, I wasn't sure what that means. And so that's really important. It's really helpful for the teachers to know that too, because they're sharing information. And like we said, they have the background knowledge, they have the whole picture in their mind, and they might not be sharing some certain information that might be helpful for you as the parent. So just to clarify information with the teacher is super important. And if they share with you that there is a concern or that there's a need to follow up with a professional, try to get in touch. And if you're not sure how to do that, follow up with the teacher. You said they're struggling with reading. Maybe they should benefit from an Orton Gillingham tutor. What does that mean? How can I find the right person? Do you have any recommendations? What does that look like? Really lean into the teacher as the expert in that area, and don't feel like you're alone. This is really a partnership, and you should be working with the teacher to find the best supports for your child and for you. um, just asking for clear examples of what that looks like, of what they mean, where this comes up, right, is so helpful for you to gain insight, to gain the whole picture, and asking for reasonable timelines. So, for example, let's stick with the reading. They're struggling with reading. Oh my gosh, does this mean that in the next month they get a tutor and they're going to be caught up and on grade level? Really clarify what that means and stick with more manageable, shorter term goals, right? Our long term goal might be that they are improving their decoding skills, reading print and decoding it, saying and sounding out words, right? That might be their goal. But what does that look like in 4 weeks, in 6 weeks, in 2 months? What should that look like by spring conferences? And really break that down with the teacher so that you have a clearer picture and that you're aligned on goals. And then, you can schedule check ins. Teachers are often able to schedule a quick phone call, email, like teachers are available for that. And so lean into that and get the support, you know, through check-ins. Don't wait till the spring conferences, right? You're getting a tutor and they should be checking in with the teacher and you should be checking in, and it should be a continued conversation with expectations, goals, and seeing if that's translating in the classroom. And, to sum it up, right, we're looking for a partnership, a whole partnership with the team and not perfection. That's our priority here. Our kids are going to go through ups and downs. We're going to go through ups and downs. The teacher's going to go through ups and downs. So we want to just be really mindful and empathetic towards everyone in this whole process.
Yes. And one thing that we talked about in the first workshop was ask the teacher what is the best way to communicate with you. We
Yeah,
made a point of saying this the first time around. But really, like, if you need to be in touch after the conference, ask, like, should we communicate via phone? Is email better? If you need a weekly touch base, then ask for what you need. And if the teacher can't do it, they're going to let you know they can't do it. But at least start by asking for what you feel you need with the goal of the child in mind, obviously.
great point. Okay, so now you've had your conversations, you have some goals. How do you make a plan at home? It seems really overwhelming. You're going to get a lot of information. The teacher is going to talk about a lot of skills in a matter of 5, 10 minutes, and you're going to feel like, wow, where do we begin? If you don't already have that feeling, right? So some parents that we talked about coming into the conference prepared with questions, like you might already have a few areas that you're curious about just based on what you're seeing, like that's tricky with homework or just some like life skills at home, some executive functioning skills. If you don't have that and you feel like you were just thrown in a tornado, ask the teacher, what are 1 to 2 priorities that we can really realistically work on at home that will be make the most difference for my child. And it could also be something that you feel is most needed in your house. I've had families come to me and say, I know they need help with a bunch of skills, but it would be so helpful if they could get themselves ready for school in the morning, right? A morning routine and an evening routine would just like make my life easier. So great, that's where we're going to start. And once you get the ball rolling, you set goals and you're meeting your goals and you're working on things. Your child's going to feel really good. You're going to feel really good. Then you can incorporate more skills. You can also ask the teacher for recommendations for what best practices look like. Going back to that reading example, should we be expected that within a month they're going to jump 5 reading levels? Is that best practices? Probably not. We never know, right? Something could really click with your child and they could take off. What's really expected, what's best practice. You can ask your child's teacher for that as well. And if you're working with a professional, ask them too. You're your child's advocate, but you're also not the teacher and you're not supposed to fix and teach, the new skills. So really lean into them as the experts. Just some general helpful tools, routines, right? Things that are predictable, happen every day. Child can feel really successful with doing the same things, for morning routine, for homework, for evening routine, getting themselves ready. Super helpful. Visuals, even if your child can read, a visual is so grounding. Think about it for yourself. What do you remember? Do you remember words? No, you probably have an image in your head of like, oh, I remember XYZ because of that image, or color, right? So that's really important to use everywhere in your home. Visuals, they're great.
Hmm.
Repeated practice, simple practice, repetition. You might think your child knows how to do something because you're with them and you've seen them do it a few times. It takes so much repeated practice for your child to feel independent and be able to do this on their own. So those are just some simple strategies that you can use at home for success.
Love those. Important after conferences and just always.
Yeah. Chloe touched on this, but we're gonna go a little, repeat it. But our job is to really build skills, not pressure. So we're really hoping that we foster a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. Phrases like, I can't do this yet, but I'm working on it. I can do hard things. That's our goal as parents, right? This happens with adults, with children, with teachers, right? So important. You can set the tone at home, model for them, like, though this was really hard for me, but I tried. Or really finding moments during the day that feel like small moments, pointing them out as praise is going to light your child up. So you can, find something small that will just be really helpful and foster that growth mindset. As simple as like, wow, you came home and went right to doing your homework. You initiated that independently. Yesterday, that was really hard for you. Great job. I noticed that.